Welcome to Bat Therapy, the psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness. We are your hosts. All right, so today we're going to be talking about a portion of an installment of Superman Batman. I love this series of comics where they put Superman and Batman together. It's like I just love their personalities riffing off of each other. So it's a
Oh
good
yeah,
one. Absolute
it is
power.
absolute power. So the Superman Batman, the first run of it they did. This came out in 2005, and it ran. It's I think Jeff Loeb
Yes,
wrote it,
who I
and
love. So good.
it ran for what, 5 issues. It was Superman Batman numbers 14 through 18, and I've seen it for sale on Amazon as well as it's on the DC app. That's where you can just go up there and read it. But it's only 5 issues. It's a quick read, but it's a really great story because I do love when the alternate universes just has like some kind of off the wall reasoning behind it. And this one's possibly one of my favorites because it's supervillains from the future that normally fight against the Legion of superheroes, and they come back in time and they kill the Kents as well as the Waynes, and then raise Bruce and Clark as their own,
Yeah.
and then kill the rest of the Justice League. They kill the rest of them. They're like, we're gonna kill them, but we're gonna raise these two as our own. And then Batman and Superman are still Batman and Superman, but they are dictators. It's
I
a
thought
lot
I thought you were
going
gonna
on.
say, but they're dicks, and I was like, yeah, it kind
I
of.
mean, yeah, I mean, not wrong, but yeah.
It is interesting. So you have Batman and Superman, but they've essentially been brainwashed from, I was going to say birth, but that from a very early age, and essentially to believe that okay, our our parents, they changed time to make things how it truly should have been, so that things are better. There's not famine, people aren't murdering each other. Sure, we killed off all of the superheroes and this, that, and the other, and there's no free will or anything, but woohoo.
Yeah.
Although they didn't kill Green Arrow, which is interesting. So, well,
Ooh.
he
Oh,
dies
yeah.
during.
I was like,
Correction, he does die, but he hasn't died long ago like the other superhero. So it's weird because they kind of, what was it that they said? So they could change time, but they could only do so much, or they would actually unravel the fabric of time, or something like that. Is that what it was?
right.
They couldn't
Because
do everything.
yeah, they're aware of like the space-time continuum, and so they're like, we're gonna change this, but we can't change too much. And I'm like, oh my god,
But they changed
like,
a lot.
why does no one learn from Barry Allen? Like, no one learns from him. Like, have y'all not learned yet? Stop screwing with time. Like, why do y'all keep doing this? And I do love the quirky names of the villains in this
Oh
because
my
it's
God, so funny.
Lightning Lord, Saturn Queen, and Cosmic King. I'm like, they're
So good.
like
Well, and also,
very campy.
because all of the mainstream superheroes were killed off, they have all these like super random superheroes that are gathered all together to try and win out. So that's really fun too.
So I had completely forgotten about the DC character Uncle Sam. I
I didn't know
I
about it except for this comic.
I had completely forgotten about him. And for those of you that don't know, this guy actually looks like the American Uncle Sam in like the red, white, and blue top hat that's on all the Only You posters. Like he
Oh,
and he runs on freedom and hope. Like he's a very, very American
Yep.
character. Like,
If you're not
ex-
from the United States, because we know we have international people, look up Uncle Sam. It's a very I'm sure you will chuckle at how American, stereotypically American it all is.
right, very over the top. And then, of course, to make it even better, he becomes a Green Lantern. And
Yes.
so, like, but I thought about it. And I'm like, man, I feel like a lot of even though it was 2005, which is strangely almost 20 years ago, but we're
Oh
not going to
god.
get into that. Yeah, I know it's crazy, but some of the characters in this, I was like cringing at the names. Uncle Sam wasn't so bad, but do you remember there was one like a Native American superhero, and his name was Scalp Hunter, and I was like, that's horrible. Like, how it's 2005. Like, how did that slip through there? Like, I was like, oh god,
Keenan,
this is
we weren't as woke in 2005 as we thought we were.
yeah, yeah. We were just
We
angry
were
with the Dixie Chicks for some strange reason. I don't know.
exactly.
It was a weird time. Freedom fries.
Oh god.
I just remember we were mad at France. It was a weird time.
We were mad in France, weren't we? I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
mad at France. I thought it was silly, but I don't even remember what the reason was.
There's a lot, yeah, there was a lot going on and that post 9/11 world. It was some very, very crazy, strange, odd times. Like I
Oh
look
god.
back on them like what was that?
Yeah.
But just like that, we
So a few things did not age well, but the story, in and of itself, does age well, I think, or is it entertaining still? But yeah, there were a few things that you're like,
So the one thing that I think was interesting about this was because Superman and Batman were raised together,
mhm,
they're very, very close in
yes,
this. Like they are
I love that.
they truly are like in the literal sense they're brothers in
Yes,
in this. And so I thought that was really interesting because and nothing's different about their costumes, nothing's different about their power set. And so I had a lot of questions because I'm like, wait, how did Batman still get
I
all of
did
the
wonder about that.
training? Like I
Yeah,
was like, how?
I
Um,
I bet his parents just had him go through it, but here's the thing, though, I did question that too because part of what helps him be essentially superhuman, even though he doesn't have superpowers, is just the obsessive drive he has following his parents' death, which you wouldn't think would be the same here because his parents die, then these like future people come, they kill the murderer, and then they take him and adopt him. And so I think though they hint that the the trauma, the rage, and all of that is still there for him because Superman Clark Kent talks about how Bruce doesn't really connect with people very easily based on
right.
his past. But you yeah, you think that Batman wouldn't quite have the same I don't know. He just wouldn't be as powerful, but he does seem to still be quite the powerhouse.
Yeah, because and it's just it's really interesting the way that the even though in this universe all is seemingly well with them, there's still trauma there. Like
Yeah,
there's still it's like lingering in the background because they end up whether like when they're going through all these different times, they end up experiencing loss because like they actually take turns dying it seems like.
yeah. So what Keaton's referring to is, if you haven't read it or it's been a while. So yes, they're dictators, and then there are all these superheroes that are very random, except for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's there, so we know her, of course. Green Arrow is there in the beginning, but his
Yeah,
his
he's got
ending's not
three
so great.
pages. Yeah.
He's got a few pages before he's finds the wrong end of,
Yeah.
Superman's
That
heat
heat vision,
vision,
I
yeah.
tell you.
Yikes. And so essentially they find out. So the fates tell Wonder Woman and the women of Themyscira that essentially this is not the true timeline. And so they're trying to fix it and like find the way to time travel and whatever. And so with all of that, it ends up where Superman and Batman end up essentially getting flung through all these different alternate reality things. And they just, yeah. essentially, they keep jumping from one to the next as soon as one of them dies, and they seem to die quite frequently when it
Yeah.
comes to these different scenarios.
And one thing that I thought was interesting because there was one timeline where it's like the world is ruled by intelligent apes, and they're all the heroes that are left are like fighting against these apes. And one thing I thought was really interesting was they knew who Superman and Batman were.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting, like knowing, like someone knowing who you're supposed to be
Mhm.
when you don't.
Yeah.
Right? Like having that label, like, oh my God, you're the world's greatest superhero, and there's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Let's talk about that. Okay, so how do you live up to that? Oh, you're the one. You are and actually, Superman's had to probably live up to this a lot. Even
Oh yeah.
even before people knew about him, just knowing what prowess he had, that's just so much pressure to live up to. Not
Yeah.
to jump completely to, I mean, different comics altogether, but with great power comes great responsibility, right? And so
Yeah.
with great expectations of others, I don't know, it's just a lot that's how much weight is on these 2 superheroes that even when time has completely ripped away their identities and they're flinging through all these random worlds and universes, yeah, there's still something recognizing who they're meant to be, and that wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it's the big difference is too is whenever I think about Superman, like everyone looks up to Superman because of just how powerful
Mm,
he is. Like he's the strongest. It's like, oh wow, the asteroid's about to hit Earth. Oh well, he just blew it away. Like he just
mhm,
like he can just take on the monumental tasks that no one else would be able to stop.
yeah,
He can stop a volcanic eruption, he can lift the Titanic, he can throw an atom bomb into space. Like he just can physically do the impossible. And then on the other side of that, I think what makes Batman so amazing and what people are like impressed by is his ability to just not only be a phenomenal fighter, but he can just outthink
yeah,
everyone.
yep.
He can outthink everyone, and then on top of that, I think what's more impressive is the fact that Gotham still exists. Like the fact that Batman still has Gotham in a state where it still runs and
Yeah.
functions is a miracle in and of itself. Like you see that and it's like, okay, yeah, that guy, he's one of the best, right?
You know what's interesting though is that you were talking about why people are impressed by Superman, and that is not why Batman's impressed by Superman. That
Yeah,
which is why I love the Superman Batman comics a lot, is they toy around a lot with that relationship and you get to look into it a little bit more. And yeah, people are easily impressed by what Superman can do, but for Bruce, what he really is amazed by is here is someone who could squish us like a bug, who could see us as ants, and yet he's the most human of everybody.
yeah. He looks up to him, and that's what was so strange about this comic. Because in this comic, like the first half of it, they're essentially the same, and it was weird.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
weird seeing them be exactly the same and have the exact same attitudes. It was odd.
Well, and so the quote unquote parents, the people from the future who um, took them, they essentially said that you need the darkness and the light together in the unique way that you have with Superman and Batman. And so they wanted to keep them as true to themselves as they could rather than, killing them off like all the other
Right.
superheroes. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting because it makes you very uneasy to see their personalities not too far off, and yet here they are plopped in as dictators, and they don't seem to mind whatsoever, and it's just kind of, "Ho-hum, here we go. Oh, happy birthday, Clark. Here's Green Arrow. You can burn him alive.
Yeah.
And okay, now let's go hang out with our parents."
Interesting gift. Interesting gift, right?
Yeah, and yet they're
Uh
not that different from themselves, and I think it's a good reminder, though, because a lot of times when we look at people who have done really terrible things, we tend to put them in this box of like monster or you are something completely different. You're not human.
Right.
And yet or they're all human. They're all people. There are wants and needs and drives and things that make them like make a person who does say things like they do in here like everyone else. So it is kind of like weird how much like themselves they are. And at the same time, I like that they did that.
Well, it is, and that's a really good point that you said there because whenever I think about like you said, the person that does something really bad and gets a label put on them, like even in like today's society, like if someone does something bad and they go to prison, in theory, they're supposed to be being rehabilitated, right? And
Mm,
when they come out, they are a different person from when they went in. But society does not treat them that way at
depends on the
at all.
society, but yes, ours is not great at
Yes.
it.
Yeah. And I thought that was I just thought that was interesting too because it's like the reverse happened when this version of Batman and Superman goes and they're actually villainous in this situation, but
Mhm.
everybody else knows them as the greatest superheroes, and so it's like an opposite thing kind of happens, and then they're
Mhm.
just like, wait, no, what's happening right now? Why did he shoot me with his laser eyes? Like what? One thing I do think's cool too is this whole story is basically about them more or less discovering the truth and
Yeah.
figuring out what's going on because as they jump from timeline to timeline they start realizing like okay, something weird
Yeah.
is going on and we have to figure this out, and they make a straight up deal with the devil here, which honestly I had forgotten about because I read this comic a long time ago. I forgot that they made a deal with Darkseid, and that's when you are really in trouble. When you go to him and you're like, "Let's make a deal, Darkseid." I'm like, "No, no, absolutely not." Like
I mean, it's
that's
in the name, Dark Side.
right. He's the ultimate bad guy. Like he's obsessed. He's obsessed with something called the anti-life equation. Like and so that's what it was
Warning,
funny,
warning.
right? And it made me honestly think about like, man, like like I think about the worst person in like my life, like not even somebody that's necessarily a villain, but somebody I would never want to see, someone I would never want to talk to. Like, what kind of situation would I have to be in for me to say, you know what, I'm gonna go to them, right? I don't know what kind of mental state that would put me in, like having to go to my absolute arch nemesis, my absolute worst enemy, and be like, I need your help.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we've talked about that in other episodes of this podcast where really that sort of thing it takes a really strong common goal or common enemy or you have to go from us versus them to okay, now we're on the same side. But yeah, it's going to take a lot when it comes to certain people or certain situations and yeah, it's so strange to see Superman and Darkseid buddying up.
And not only Superman and Darkseid, but and he's probably my favorite character in this whole comic. There's an older Superman
Mhm.
that's also there that's basically from the future and knows exactly how things are supposed to be. And I loved his interactions with his younger self because he's like, I'm smarter than you, I'm stronger than you. You have no idea what's going on, and I do. I wish so bad that I could go back and do that to my younger self. I
I'm
would,
smarter than you.
right? Like, kid, listen, it's gonna be okay. It really is gonna be okay, and you really should not be crying about this right now. Like, you can, like, I just want to kind of, I more than anything, I think I want to give my younger self a hug and be like, listen, you're gonna get through this. You're stronger than you think. And but I really loved that older Superman that was like, y'all need to get it together
Mhm.
because this ain't gonna fly. Y'all need to fix this. I do love how he was there. He felt like a dad. He did feel
Yeah.
like a dad. Like he was just kind of shows up and he's like, look, y'all screwed up big time, and now we got to make a deal with
Yeah. Being
this guy,
dictators is not great.
right?
Let's change this.
Right. Like you did the opposite of what you were supposed to do. Why is Lex Luthor out here putting bounties on you because you're so evil? Like what? uh but I just yeah, I do love his character because it's interesting because I almost looked at it like he saw their potential and what they should be, and knowing that, okay, you have to go and fix this. And so, in order to fix this, it doesn't even matter. We're going to make a deal with the worst being ever to make sure that this happens.
Yeah.
And so they go back in time. He gives them a time machine because yeah, the way you fix time travel issues is more time travel.
That's a
And
good point. That is always the way you fix time travel, and that seems like a mistake.
right, well, gosh, there's so many plot holes in time travel too because it's
Yeah.
like that doesn't work because when here's the thing about time travel that always gets me. This is the thing. Whenever they go back in time and they screw up, like just go back 5 minutes before that, right? Like you essentially there's no reason you can't do that, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to go back 5 more minutes ahead of time and rinse and repeat, but that doesn't make for a good story. That's
Yeah.
just like excessive.
But I do wanna hit on something that you're bringing up here, which is essentially that they start doing things that they wouldn't normally do. And so for Superman, it's making a deal with Darkseid that kind of hovers over his head at the end. And then for Batman, what stood out to me was so within the storyline, one of the interesting things is okay, so they're going through time or these different timelines or realities or whatever they are. And they realize, okay, we need to fix it. So like Keaton's pointing out, let's fix time travel by time traveling. And then they go back and they're essentially trying to stop their adoptive parents from doing what they did and killing Clark's parents, from taking Bruce, etc. And so everything goes great for Clark because his parents are going to live. So great. Well, then we get to Bruce. His life's still going to suck because they're not stopping his parents from dying. They're
Right.
just stopping the killing of the guy who did it and him getting connected with his like new adoptive parents. Da, da, da. So he goes in and he stops it.
Yeah.
He literally stops his parents from dying, and then Clark has to go and find Bruce, who's no longer Batman, because Batman essentially said, "I'm not playing this game anymore. Why? If we're going back in time, like Eden said, going back in time again, we can just cause more problems." So when they're trying to fix what Bruce broke, essentially, um, Batman ends up killing somebody, and he kills Ra's al Ghul.
Hmm.
And he actually says something along the lines of, "Well, killing him doesn't count because it's going to
Right.
make everything right again, and it will actually undo all the other killings that we've done across time." So, isn't that interesting? Kind of like Superman and Darkseid pairing up. That's an odd pairing. And then here you have Batman killing people, which yeah, yeah, Keaton, you've argued how Batman must kill people. He just doesn't mean to. They're kind of,
Yeah. It's one of those things.
it's unintended consequences. But
In the movies, it happens all the time.
yeah, setting that aside, theoretically, he doesn't kill people. And yet here's Batman saying, okay, well, I'm actively killing Ra's al Ghul, but it's okay. It doesn't count. So this is a really great example of cognitive dissonance.
Oh.
Um, yeah. So cognitive dissonance essentially what you have is we have our thoughts, we have our behaviors. And well, we have our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors if you want to kind of simplify the things that make up our experiences, what we think, what we do, and how we feel. And they all affect each other. And so sometimes we do things that don't line up with our belief system. So, Batman killing people when theoretically he's anti-killing people. And that
Yeah.
makes you feel terrible. You feel uncomfortable when your actions don't line up with what you believe. And so either you feel crummy, you continue to feel crummy, or if you're like, "No, I don't wanna feel like this," you either change your actions or you change your thoughts and your beliefs about your actions. And so he's not changing the killing. He says, "Okay, well, here's why this one doesn't count." And I just thought that was so interesting.
Yeah. So all right. So I have a question for you about cognitive dissonance. Is it one of those things where it's always bad, or is there sometimes where this could be a good thing? Like I guess
Mm.
my thought is like, say for instance, if you did take a life, but it was either in self-defense or to save someone else, is it considered cognitive dissonance when you say, I did that, but I only did it because of this? Is that considered cognitive dissonance, or is that just
So
something
cognitive
different?
dissonance would be the tension between let's say you have someone who says, "I don't kill people. I value life. I value people. I'm not a killer." And yet they kill somebody. I mean, this is an extreme example.
Right.
But every day we have things as well, like I'm an honest person, but I lied to somebody
Hmm.
is a more common one that probably everyone hits on at some point.
Like, oh,
If
it's just
they
a white lie.
Yeah, it's just a white lie. And so cognitive dissonance isn't a good or a bad thing. It's just kind of a reality of how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors interact with one another.
Hmm.
And being aware of that dissonance can be useful because you can make sure that you're responding to it in the way that you want to. So, the fact that you lie and then feel uncomfortable about it because you see yourself as an honest person, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Hmm.
Um, but it's helpful to be aware of, okay, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Oh, it's because I see myself as an honest person and I lied here. And then being aware of those cognitive dissonances can help us be able to work through them so we end up feeling better in the long run. The unfortunate thing is sometimes we do things that might actually, I don't know, make things more difficult in the long run. Like, for example, um, Batman saying, "I'm only killing someone for a means to an end." In this
Hmm.
case, isn't necessarily a bad thing that'll lead him down a terrible path because it is going to reset time and get everything back on track.
Hmm.
But it's also something that he could have easily said within that dictator role. I'm killing someone, but it's for a greater good. In fact, they were saying that the whole time while they were there. So it's an
That's true.
interest, right? So it's an interesting thing where if you're not careful, um, you might change your behaviors or change your thoughts in a way that might lead you down a dark path, but you can also change things for the good too. Like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. Maybe you find it a less violent way in the future.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's good to feel guilty about things that we do, and it makes us think twice the next time around. Or maybe, like you said, maybe sometimes it was self-defense or this, that, and the other, and hopefully that can help you feel better about it.
And you touch on something too about like maybe it's good to feel bad about things sometimes. This is what's interesting about this comic. This was like I think one of the most poignant points. Superman and Batman still remember everything that they did in those past
Oh, yeah.
histories,
Yeah.
and it
When they get back.
really
Mhm.
weighs heavily on them. Like they remember killing Green Arrow. Superman remembers killing Wonder Woman, which oh my god, that was brutal because he like chokes her with her lasso. Like it was like, oh my,
Yeah.
like this is rough. Yeah, he remembers that. And so they remember all the bad things that
Mhm.
they did, even though technically in this timeline it didn't happen, it still weighs
Yeah.
on them. And it made me realize, like, even if something turns out okay, traumatic events that we go through still sit with us. Even if
Yeah.
we get past it and we're essentially have a new we're in a new stage of life, we still from time to time get held back by those, like, something that we
Mhm.
went through a long time ago, right?
That may not even be holding you back anymore. Because I mean, in this case, it's weird, right? Because they technically did those things, but they also technically didn't do those things all at the
Yeah.
same time,
Yeah.
which
And
is a mental twist right there, right? So let's take cognitive dissonance. Okay, so you have your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Well, they both did the action, but also didn't do the action.
yes. It makes me, and honestly, what it makes me think about is when someone does something wrong under the influence of, like,
Mm,
alcohol or drug, because yes,
that's a tricky one. Yeah.
they did it, but were they 100% themselves when this happened? I don't know if you can say they
Yeah.
are, right?
Well, and then I mean, that it obviously is a different set of circumstances, but also layered in complexity, right? So, where's the free will? Where is there not? So, okay, well, did you choose to be in that state? But then also, okay, well, there's also addiction processes that could be going on, and what is under a
Right.
person's control versus not. And what
Yes.
would they have done had they known what would happen later versus not? And yeah, it is one of those things kind of like that where there are times where yeah, it's not as clean and clear as I specifically chose to do this thing knowing what would occur, and I chose to do it anyway. Life's a lot of times not that simple.
Always shades of gray.
Yeah.
Always. Always. And I honestly, I hadn't even thought about things like addiction, like the
Yeah.
things that people do when they're addicted to things, like, and it gets to a point where someone is not themselves because
Mhm.
their body is physically in need of something,
Yep.
or it can be a mental addiction. But either way, it's almost like they aren't they aren't themselves, they aren't in their right mind.
And you know what? We don't have a clean and clear way of really defining that. Okay, when is someone in control of themselves? When are they not in control of themselves? It's like you were saying, all of these shades of gray. And then here you have time travel. Another great example. So, okay, you still have Superman and Batman. They're very much themselves, and yet they're doing these things that are very out of character. And clearly, it's because of what these future people did and changed. And yet, they still were adults choosing for the. I mean, this is why the legal system is so complicated, right?
Yes,
When
absolutely.
guilty, not guilty, and whatnot, and when they go into a person's past and their childhood upbringing or their
Mhm.
brain chemistry, or they pull all these things to say, hey, we don't have a good handle on when is someone completely quote in control of their
Yeah,
behaviors. What does that even mean?
yeah, and so, I really, yeah, it made me think about that a lot at the end when they're still, honestly, they're really, really shaken and distraught from the things that they did in these alternate timelines, and it's it felt like they were trying to get back to home base, because when they're back in the right timeline, one of the first things they do is they go find Green Arrow,
Yep.
and check on him, and he's Green
He's
Arrow
so great.
in the comics is so funny. He calls them the Hardy Boys.
Yep.
uh, and yeah, he's like, Green Arrow in the comics is like ultra liberal. It's just like, get out of my city. What are y'all doing here? Go help someone else. Get out of
Yeah.
my face.
He's
Like,
he's just so snarky.
he is. He's very
I love it.
snarky. And then of course they go check in. They meet with Wonder Woman. Superman meets with Wonder Woman,
Mhm.
and he doesn't tell her what he did, but he kind of just says, like, lets her know how thankful he is
Yeah.
for her and her friendship and who she is. And it just, I think that happens to all of us. Like we might do something to someone and it might even hurt us more than it necessarily hurts them,
Mm,
but it weighs on us so much because it's like, oh my
mhm,
god, I can't believe I did that. And they might not even be thinking about it. They might didn't even notice it, but you can be like, I wonder if they think this. I wonder if I should have said that. And like it'll weigh on you
mhm.
what you do to someone else, even if it doesn't necessarily affect them as much.
Yeah. I mean, this is obviously an extreme version of that where, okay, well, it's a different time. So
Right.
she
Definitely
definitely
an
doesn't
extreme.
know, which is nice. So he knows for sure she isn't aware. But you're right. It does hit on that piece where there's so many inner workings going on for a person. And it also makes me think of that complicated piece of when are you I always try and be mindful when I'm helping someone try and heal and they're also trying to figure out how to heal around other people that they know or maybe others have been harmed as well, whether it has to do with a trauma that they both experienced or maybe one perpetrated against the other. Um or, we were talking about addiction before. Unfortunately, addiction has a lot of ripple effects and a lot of people can get affected. And you want to repair that. You want to do something. But it's so important to be mindful about what would help me, what would help the other person. And it's tricky. So, like Superman, for example, he might have felt better in some ways to tell her,
Hmm.
take a little bit of weight off. It's not so much of a secret. It can feel good to be able to apologize to someone outright for something. And yet, in this set of circumstances, she doesn't have any clue about it and it isn't really connected to it in any way. And it hits on that piece of sometimes we have to be careful because he could have told her the whole story and been really apologetic and this, that, and the other. But who would he have been doing that for?
That's a good point.
Right? So he's feeling bad about what he did to her, but then if he went through this whole process, in this set of circumstances anyway, it probably would only be benefiting him. So it's not really helping her in any way. But it's tricky how that kind of stuff can work. So when like you were saying, sometimes there are things that we're worried about with other people. When do we approach something and it's truly because we're worried about that person versus we're trying to reduce the load on ourselves and it's actually adding load to the other person?
Yeah, and it honestly, what it also made me think about too, in especially in their situation, is I questioned, should they feel guilty?
Hmm.
Like, should they feel guilty? Because and this is something I feel like is the just because of how things like therapy are portrayed in television and in movies. I feel like every single time you see a session going on, at some point the therapist or the like whoever it is says you shouldn't feel guilty.
Mm,
It seems like it's always you shouldn't
mm.
feel guilt. But I thought about it and I was like, but they did it. Like, but they did do that. Like sometimes you should feel guilt, shouldn't you? Like honestly, it's a bad thing if you don't feel any kind of guilt.
So we're hitting on cognitive dissonance again, right?
Okay.
The guilt is the feeling coming from a disconnect between the belief systems, what a person values, how they view themselves, and the actions that they took. And so guilt would be the response someone has when the behavior is something that they see going against what they value and how they feel they quote should be or what they hope to. I don't like using shoulds a lot because shoulds tend to automatically bring about feelings of shame and guilt
Mhm.
versus what we hope to be, what we would aspire to be, that sort of thing. Um, And yeah, it's an intriguing question. So it's complicated here because once again, we have this thing where they did it, but they didn't do it. And so what's their culpability in all of this? But you're right. I agree with you in that. So I'm not a therapist that always tells their clients that they don't need to feel guilty. So, that definitely is in there. Sometimes guilt's not a bad thing. And in fact, usually the way I encourage it is you're feeling what are you feeling? Okay, we're identifying guilt.
Hmm.
Where do you think that's coming? So helping them highlight how their thoughts and their actions might be in conflict with each other so that they can from there figure out, okay, what is this guilt? Is this guilt trying to tell me something in terms of a way that I need to change something, or a way that I need to maybe um, be mindful of things in the future? Or is there something else going on? Because sometimes we feel guilty and we don't, it's not our fault.
Right.
Sometimes
That's
we
true.
feel guilty and there's not a lick we can do about it.
Right. It's-
Sometimes we feel guilty and you know what? We did something.
right.
And I'm with you. When we're feeling guilty because of something that we've done that is in conflict with the best version of ourselves, that guilt can actually be helpful in creating change. If you don't allow yourself to feel the guilt, you're not going to go through the work you need to change the behaviors or to change the thoughts going on that are getting in the way of being a better version of yourself.
And honestly, looking at that comic, I do feel like at the end, with that, with what they did weighing on them, it did seem like Batman and Superman were both better people
Mm,
from it. It did. Like, I'm not going to they especially Superman. Superman really seemed like he was just like really passionate about making sure, like, I think they both locked down that, like, we do not kill. I think it just
mm,
really locked that down even more by the end there, because they're like, in alternate universes we did, and now it's weighing on us. Because, and I also wonder, like, is it weighing on them because killing is wrong, or is it weighing on them because that's just their rule that they broke for themselves?
excellent question. And that's why things like guilt can be so helpful if you're willing to sit with it enough to actually break it down and figure out what it's coming from, what it's stemming from. It really sucks. It does not feel good to do it. But it helps you ask those questions of yourself. What is this hitting on? And yeah, how much of it is true to me? How much of it is some expectation that I'm getting from somewhere, or just some kind of rule that's been set that may or may not make sense? And yeah, they do have to do a lot of this questioning. It's interesting though because there's in my opinion they're still in this vicious cycle because killing's wrong. How did we fix it? We killed people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a little, iffy, but still, sometimes too you get stuck in bad situations and you may not have good options. And you
Right.
may have to choose a not great option to avoid a worse option, which it sounds like for them that's how they dealt with the cognitive dissonance here, where yes, they learned not killing and why it's so important, and look what lengths we had to go to offset that
Yeah.
because of where it
That's
led us. Yeah. And then
yeah.
Batman, I feel like got the shit stick in this whole thing because his biggest realization in my mind is he's Bruce Wayne. Superman comes to him and he's like, "You're Batman." And he's like, "I don't care." And he's like, "No, but you're Batman." And then essentially though, it gets to this point where Bruce realizes how terrible the world will be without Batman. And
Hmm.
so I feel like for him, it's also a realization that that stubbornness that I had of there must be a Batman, there's almost this ironic letdown because he finds out that that's true.
Yeah, but at the same time, what's interesting is because they remember all this, he essentially he now remembers his life and growing up
That's
with
true.
his parents and his family, and that was really interesting to me because now I'm like, is that better for him or is it worse? Like he got the life
Yeah.
that he could have had, and
Mhm.
then he had to give it up,
Yeah.
but what happened was still real. It was in a different
Yep.
timeline,
Yep.
but he remembers it. He remembers growing up with his family. And I just, yeah, gosh,
That would be
it
so
was heavy.
complicated because, yeah, on the one hand, it was real. And on
Mhm.
the other hand, you know what could have been in this reality. Yeah, that's such a
Yeah,
tricky
because
thing.
if you ask Batman, would you say, would do you think if he had a choice, would he completely forget about that, or is
Ooh.
he thankful that he actually did get
Yeah.
that? I thought that was I thought it was really interesting the way it all played out. Do we have a mindful nerd moment?
Do it. So, I had trouble thinking of one for this one because I didn't want us to be mindfully be dictators. But um
That
although, we are coming from our own viewpoint, so, hopefully we're not insulting, anybody out there in terms of how their own countries and government are set up, but, um, they all have their pros and cons, but essentially, they were killing people pretty willy-nilly, and I didn't really want us mindfully doing that, so,
no,
uh
that's bad.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
not do that. So, what I decided we could do is there's this visual that always stands out to me about this comic where there's this giant statue of Batman and Superman standing back to back with their arms crossed in front of them
Mhm.
that stands in the main city. I don't know if it's Metropolis or somewhere else, but that's in the main city. I mean, it's a huge
It's a giant
statue.
statue. Yeah, it's a huge
It's
statue.
huge statue. So I was thinking it could be fun to do a mindful nerd moment where you pretend that you're posing for the superhero statue, whether you want to be Batman or Superman in that context. So whichever
Cool.
one, they're in the same pose. I double checked before we recorded.
That's
So yeah, standing back to back, you and your superhero counterpart with your arms crossed, just taking in that powerful stance and the pride that comes with being a superhero and being acknowledged for the good you're doing. We're gonna ignore the circumstances of the statue in this case, but, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So, sit comfortably, close your eyes if you're comfortable with it. If not, just soften your gaze, not looking at anything in particular, and focus in on your breath. Notice your inhale and your exhale. You don't have to change it in any way, just noticing what it's like to help you focus in on this moment and helping you focus in on my voice for this mindfulness. So I want you to um, imagine yourself as Superman or Batman, or you could be a different superhero if you'd like. But imagining yourself in this superhero pose that I was describing as someone's taking a sketch for your superhero statue. So I want you to imagine your your feet about shoulder length apart. You're standing solidly and your arms are crossed against your chest in front of you. You're standing up straight. You're in your superhero uniform. You're looking straight ahead and you're just feeling your own power. Not in a not in a selfish way, not in a gloating way, just acknowledging how it feels to have super heroic power and realizing that you're doing such good that other people see it and recognize it and want to acknowledge it, want to spread that power and appreciation to others by creating a statue of you in this power pose. Just feel what that's like. You're taking in the moment. You're taking one of the few opportunities a superhero has to just Breathe in, breathe out. The appreciation. Feeling the appreciation, feeling your power, feeling your abilities, and feeling the pride of doing something good with the abilities that you have. And just take in one more deep breath, really acknowledging and appreciating this moment. You fly and zip and grapple around all over, saving people. You barely get a chance to just appreciate. So, once again, feeling your solid stance, those feet shoulder width apart, your arms crossed over your chest, looking straight out ahead of you, enjoying this moment. And turning to the person creating the statue, smile at them, say thank you. And next, I want you to take a deep breath because we're going to start shifting out of our mindful nerd moment. Breathing in as that superhero, super powered, getting your statue built. Breathing out, holding on to that super poweredness, but shifting it back into your own human form. Breathing in, shifting from getting your statue made, and breathing out, being back in your room, listening to the podcast. All right. How was that? Getting your superhero statue.
It was so this one was interesting. It was good, but I did find myself thinking about the being stuck in that particular timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was difficult because I'm like, wait, do I deserve this statue? Like, constantly.
So, these are things that can come up though. I mean, obviously, some, like we were saying with guilt, it is helpful to
Right,
question our thoughts and reactions and feelings. But also, when we feel pride, a lot of times, I mean, it depends on your culture, your personality, etc. But a lot of times when we feel pride, we go, wait, should I be feeling
right.
that? Now I'm full of myself now, right? Like sometimes we think pride equals selfish, being just like too focused on yourself, not focused on other people. But sometimes, hey, we did a good thing.
Yeah,
So not to say that we shouldn't question and make sure we're doing a good thing.
yeah,
And you're right, the statue in this set of circumstances wasn't too great. But I love the recognition of these things. And when you're doing mindfulness and something like that comes up, it can be helpful to not just have that thought, but create an observation. So, oh, I notice I'm having the thought of, do I deserve this?
yeah.
So that you make it part of the mindfulness experience that you're doing rather than seeing it as like a drifting off.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like that. Nice. Thanks for nerding out with us.
I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown. Find me on social media at Crafting the Mind.
And I'm comic enthusiast and professional nerd Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JBS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. See you next week, same bat time, same bat channel.